Right. TSD mindfulness. There's one thing I know, and that's that you've probably never heard of it before. It's brand new, and so this is really exciting that you're here at the beginning and here to learn and here to check it out and here to see if this is something that you want to spend more time learning about. So let me just jump right in and start explaining to you what it is so you have a better understanding. I can give you a bit of a summary of the practice. What's really important to understand about TSD mindfulness is that it is a practice in zoning in, focusing on what's going on in the head area, the head space. We often refer to that as the mind, as well as the gut, what's going on in the gut, and what's going on in the heart. So what we're going to be learning is this system of the head, the gut, and the heart, and learning about how these different parts of the system affect one another, and learning about how we can affect these different parts of our system, this temperamental system of the heart and the head and the gut, and how we cannot necessarily affect this system, this temperamental system. And so that's where the mindfulness is really key, is that ability to tune in and observe and be aware of these parts of this system so we can get to this point where we start to understand how we can affect the system in a positive way and how we really don't have an effect on the system and what we need to surrender to. So that's a really a good gist of TSD mindfulness. I'll go into more detail to kind of explain a couple of these concepts to you. So what happens when we work with this system is we create balance and stability in our lives, in our being, in the way we feel in our lives. A typical mindfulness practice is more geared toward the head and the mind and what's going on in here, and also tuning in to the body, which we'll go into a little bit more detail about the subtleties of those relationships. But what's different here is we're going to also use certain techniques to zone into our gut area and our heart area and see how those work together. In the gut, we're going to become mindful of impulses, of gut reactions, things like that. In the heart, we're going to become aware of these like rhythmic symbols that come about through our practice when we focus on the heart. So these rhythmic symbols that come about in the heart and the emotions of the heart. So the emotions in the heart, these rhythmic symbols, we'll get in tuned with using this mindfulness, a certain type of mindfulness practice. And when we tune into the heart, some of you may have already been doing some similar work, but when we tune into the heart, we are going to get in touch with anything from some trauma to joy, right? And everything in between. There's a lot there. And what happens is this stuff going on in our head and the stuff going on in our gut, it distracts us from what's going on in our heart. So another important thing to understand about what TSD mindfulness is that it's a practice in moving our consciousness into our heart center. And it's amazing. It's amazing what will open up, what we'll become aware of, new perspectives, new awarenesses, and some of that could be a little trauma, but in order to see everything, we see that and the joy, and then getting in touch with true joy that's there in our heart, that when we're not in a spiritual practice, not having a meditation practice, we're often distracted from that because of what's going on in our head and what's going on in our gut. And then we move into the heart area, then we become more in tune with the reality that's going on in our heart area, which is so important. And all of that going on in our heart area affects our relationships and relationships with everything, relationships not only with people, but relationships with the things in our lives, with our work, with our free time, with the foods that we eat, and so forth. I'll probably talk a little bit about that. But just essentially, another gist of TSD mindfulness is this taming of the mind, soothing of the gut, and dwelling in the heart. So again, we're taming the mind, which is very much like typical Buddhist mindfulness practice. We'll talk about that a lot. And then that soothing the gut, which might be a little bit different than some of the practices that you've been working on. And then dwelling in the heart, like really being in that heart area and using those mindfulness skills to allow this process to happen. So some of the benefits of practicing TSD mindfulness, relationships will improve. Like I said, not only the people in your lives, but the things in your lives. So you can think more a little about, you can take a moment and consider what some of those things are in your life. Like I said, free time, the food we eat, work, finances, media, politics, and then with friends, family, coworkers, for those people in our lives. So I'll say that again. With our work, we have a relationship with our work, the food that we eat, our free time, finances, a relationship with the media, politics, family, friends, coworkers, and I'm sure there's so many other things and groups of people that you can think about that you have relationships with. We have relationships with everything. Some relationships aren't just as charged as others. We have a relationship with the table that sits in front of us. We have a relationship with everything that's around us. So that's why this practice is so powerful, because we are enhancing and making those relationships more real and more connected, or disconnected sometimes. Sometimes what this practice does is it actually will help you disconnect from certain things. So it's moving into that relationship that's good for you, however that looks. And the TSD mindfulness practice allows you to have this awareness of the motives that drive your relationships, the feelings that drive these relationships, your desires that drive these relationships. So that's another benefit, is this new awareness of how things that are going on in your system, of your head and your gut and your heart, how that system is affecting the way that you interact with the different things and people in your life, and understanding on a new level these motives, these feelings and desires. So I'm saying some of this and it might sound complicated, all these different things that we're thinking about and these different aspects that we're putting together, but it's really not complicated. It's actually very simple. It's simple, just this taming of the mind, the soothing of the gut, and the dwelling in the heart. And what happens is we're letting go of what does not serve us, through this practice. We're embracing what does serve us. We are setting stronger boundaries between us and what doesn't serve us. And then we're also loosening up boundaries to things that do serve us, that maybe our boundaries are too tight. And so through this practice, we're able to loosen those boundaries. So that's one of the ways that you'll see this practice having a real effect in your world and in your life. And it does have a lot to do with perspective. I don't know if you've read some of the research and some of the information out there about actually perceiving from the heart. Our culture um, everything around us is really supporting us to perceive from our mind, from our head. Uh, and so it's this idea that we're moving our consciousness more into our heart and perceiving more from our heart, and things look different. The world looks different when you perceive it from your heart than when you perceive it from your head. And so that's another benefit or part of this practice is learning how to do that. I want to talk about stress and how TSD mindfulness has an effect on stress and how it's related to stress. Because stress reduction is a huge benefit of practicing TSD mindfulness. Have you ever noticed how you sometimes use your typical mindfulness practice, if you're someone that's already practicing mindfulness? And have you ever noticed that sometimes when you practice your typical mindfulness practice, it helps your stress and you relieve the stress, but there's sometimes when it just doesn't. It's you practice and practice, and you're tuning in and doing the mindfulness, yet your stress is not affected. It's not affected. And so I want to talk a little bit about that and explain why that's happening. Stress originates either in the mind, in the headspace, and in TSD mindfulness we call that the mental field. So stress either originates in your mental field, or stress originates in your gut field, or stress originates in your heart field. And so depending on where that stress originates, we need to use a little bit different, a little subtle difference in our technique in addressing that stress. So if you have stress that originates in the mental field, in our mind, then the typical mindfulness practice is going to work. It's going to work. The way that typical mindfulness practice is built, it's built to address the mind and taming the mind and relaxing any stress that is created in the mind. It's not designed to address stress that originates in the gut or address stress that originates in the heart. And I know that's probably a big something to chew on, and maybe something that you don't necessarily agree with, and that's okay. We can just kind of go with this, and you can try it out for yourself and see if it works. But one thing maybe you're thinking is, well, what about the body? Mindfulness, there's, we often tune into our stress that's in the body. But what happens is the stress originates in the mind and it manifests itself in the body. Or the stress originates in the heart and it manifests itself in the body. Or the stress originates in the gut and then it manifests itself in the body. So that's why I haven't said that stress originates in the body. It manifests in the body. So a few things here. One is that TSD mindfulness will help you be mindful enough to realize where that stress is originating. Or to realize, is it originating in my mind, my mental field? Is it originating in my heart, or is it originating in my gut? And then you can work with it in a little bit subtler ways depending on where. So for example, if it originates in, let me just check my notes here, I don't want to miss something. So I'll go ahead and start talking about the gut. And so if the stress originates in the gut, it's driven by the fear that something is going to change, because the gut is really based on this fear of change. And so if we have a stress that's originating in the gut area, then if we use a practice that helps address this fear of change, then that's how we soothe. That's one way we can soothe the gut and we'll have a class just on that, working on soothing the gut through this fear of change. But it's a real method in soothing and calming. And it's so amazing. You'd be surprised because if you get it, you realize that the stress is starting in your gut. It's originating there, not in your head. You've tried to use regular mindfulness and it's not really having an effect. And then you can start to feel and realize that it's in the gut. And then you use this approach, it can shift so quickly. And it's a really the gut is very responsive. It can be very based in fear and can really send stress through our entire body. But it's also very responsive when we start to address the gut and its fear. So that's the good news. All right. So like I said, the mindfulness teachings are brand new. It's new. So this is exciting that you are here. You are a founding student. And although the practice is new, you will see it reflected in many things around you. You will see these concepts reflected in biology. You will see them reflected in psychology. You'll see them reflected in spirituality, certain religions, and things like that. For example, this trinity of the mind, the gut, and the heart is reflected in biology of the brain, the reptilian brain, the limbic brain, and then the neocortex. Right, the neocortex can be correspond to the mental field in TSD mindfulness teachings. The limbic brain can be associated with the heart field of TSD teachings, and the reptilian brain can be associated with the gut. So that's just one example of this logic, emotion, instinct system showing up in other places in your world. And many of the approaches that I'll be sharing with you for TSD mindfulness, you may have heard different places or maybe not. But I just want to be really clear that this is a new practice. It's something new, even though you may have heard bits and parts of it other places that you've been. And since it is new, there is a chance that this will be something that will grow and more people will want to learn it. And if you find it to be very effective and life-changing, you may decide that you would like to teach it to groups of people in your area. So that's something exciting to think about, that maybe one day you will be a teacher of TSD mindfulness and bringing this to people that are in your circles. So please keep that in mind. That is something I'm completely open to when you feel ready to start teaching this to others. So since TSD mindfulness is new, I can't refer you to a bunch of research that shows that TSD mindfulness works, right? We don't have that yet. So what I'd like to invite you to do is to take the TSD challenge. And with the TSD challenge, what you're doing is you are going to experiment by practicing taming your mental field, soothing your gut field, and dwelling in your heart field for, let's say, 5 times a week for 30 days. So practicing TSD mindfulness for 5 days a week for 30 days is the challenge. And I invite you to do this challenge because I'm quite confident that after 30 days, you're going to be like completely wowed. You are going to be really surprised how quickly and interestingly things will shift in your world. Relationships, the relationships that you have with the different beings in your world, the relationships you have with the different stuff in your world, and seeing how these shift based on this practice. So I invite you to take the TSD challenge. You can start tomorrow, you could start tonight, you could start next week, but a steady practice for 30 days. And the length of time that you decide to practice for is up to you. If you know that about 5 or 10 minutes works in your schedule for 5 days a week, then do 5 to 10 minutes. But just know the more time you put into it, obviously, the more you'll get out of it. But you know, pick something that's reasonable for you, something that you can commit to. All right. Some of us watch TV on a daily basis or listen to a certain radio show on a daily basis. I've heard that if sometimes you can kind of give something like that up, something that you do daily like that, and kind of replace it temporarily for 30 days with the TSD mindfulness practice and see where it takes you. I think you'd be really surprised. So the proof, I think, will really be in the pudding. So I invite you to take this challenge. And I also invite you to let people know that you are taking this challenge. If you're on social media, posting on social media what you're doing so you can touch base with your social media contacts on a daily or every other day basis. I suggest that you tell your friends, tell your spouse, tell people that are close to you what you're doing. And maybe there's a certain somebody that you can ask to be kind of your accountability partner, somebody who you trust, just kind of give you that nudge, like, did you meditate today? How's that going? Did you journal about it? If you decide to keep a little bit of a journal, things like that. And so what I want you to notice are your levels of anxiety, levels of irritability, your energy levels, how energetic you feel, how focused you feel, your feelings of love and care, your connections, how connected you feel with others, your perspectives on food, your perspectives on money, on your work. Maybe you can make your own personal list. I'll go through that again. Noticing your anxiety, your irritability, your energy, your focus, your feelings of love and care, connections with others, your perspectives on food, money, and work. Okay, so that's a good place to start, and maybe you can make a better list for yourself. But you know, monitoring those, you know, every few days and noting any shifts in those departments, and your stress, and your stress level to anxiety. Well, I guess anxiety, I listed that. So that's the TSD mindfulness challenge. And let me know how it's going also. All right, so we are going to move into the part of the class when you are going to be practicing. I'm going to do some guided meditation with you. There's a few things that I want to talk to you about first. Yeah, well, it's kind of a lot. I kind of have a few things, sorry, to talk to you about before we actually meditate. This is the beginning class, so there's a lot to cover. So we're going to be taking our first steps toward taming the mind tonight. We're going to be working on the mental field and taming the mind. So some of this might be similar to some of your traditional mindfulness practice, and some is going to be a little different too. I have been saying mind, but I want to make sure that I don't confuse anyone because the mind actually moves. We really don't need to necessarily refer to this headspace, what we call the mental field, as the mind, because it's only the mind because that's where it's located. Our mind can move into different fields of our temperamental body. So if our mind moves down into our heart, then we're in our heart center, and so it's a little different. So I'm going to probably not refer to this as the mind as much and start more referring to mental field, because the mind really is where our awareness is, and most of us, our awareness is up here, and then through this practice, what we want to do is move our awareness down into the heart. It's a practice. So the practice of taming the mind or the mental field is based in Buddhist mindfulness practice. Some of it's not. I'm not a Buddhist teacher. I don't want to make it sound that this is Buddhist. It is Buddhist inspired. There's a lot of Buddhism that we use and that I will refer to, but it does stray in certain ways, so I don't want to tell you that this is a Buddhist practice. But I am going to talk about the 7 factors of enlightenment because they're awesome, and they are going to help us move into this taming of the mind. And I will put that list up for you. You can look at that. All right, so tonight we're going to focus on concentration and the mental field. Our temperamental body is made up of our mental field, our gut field, and our heart field, and these work together to drive our temperament, to drive our behaviors, drive our feelings, and our thoughts. And in regards to TSD mindfulness, the mental field is most correlated to the demonstration of free will and our concentration. So since we are starting with that step of taming our mind, then it's really appropriate to start talking about will, because we use will the most in the part of TSD mindfulness practice that is the taming of the mind. And will isn't something that you usually hear meditation teachers talking about. This is a little bit different. If you feel a little bit uncomfortable with this, I invite you to just listen and not asking you to change your practice. If you feel really comfortable with the way you do it for this taming of the mind part, then do what works for you. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. But I just want to say that because sometimes, bringing up this idea of will and using our will is kind of counterintuitive to mindfulness. But hopefully you can stick with me and see where this goes. All right. So free will. So let's think about and consider some of the ways in which you exercise free will in your life. The way you move your body, the foods that you eat, that's free will. You decide to eat those foods. The words that you speak, the decisions that you make, the decision to go to the store is a demonstration of free will. So just for a moment, just consider some of the ways that you demonstrate your free will in your life. And now, let them go, because we are, in this practice tonight, we are not using our free will to probably do any of those things that you're considering, unless what you put on your list is your free will to concentrate your attention in a certain direction. And that's where will plays an important part in TSD mindfulness practice, is we are using our will intentionally to concentrate our attention in a certain direction. And so in our meditation that I lead you through tonight, our mindfulness meditation, we're going to practice that. Practice using our will to concentrate our attention. And so we have will. We have it. And therefore, we're supposed to use it. We were built to use will. And so it's important to practice a spiritual practice that helps you discern when and where to use that will. And that's one thing that's really clear about TSD mindfulness teaching, is that it's very appropriate and needed to use your will to concentrate your attention in a certain direction. This is the first step that we'll be taking, taming our mind. And so I'm going to lead you through a meditation in which you are going to notice a sound, and then I'm going to lead you to take a step back and notice what part of your consciousness is steering your attention on that sound. Okay, so I'm going to say that again. I'm going to lead you through a meditation in which you're going to notice a sound in your environment, like a typical mindfulness practice, but what might stray a little bit away from a typical mindfulness practice is then I'm going to lead you to take a step back and notice what part of your consciousness is steering your attention to stay concentrated on that sound. And then I'm going to ask you to take another step back, and you're going to notice the actual behaviors and the energy of that part of your consciousness that is steering your attention. Okay, so this is a part of our consciousness that we're going to begin to strengthen in this practice. And like I said, talk about will is not necessarily typical for Buddhist teachers. Might not have said much about this, or some of your other teachers. And like I said, if you feel comfortable, use your practice. Okay, so what we're doing is I'm leading you into directions and steps to tame your mind. Some of you might be really good at that. You might have that mastered. You might know how to tame your mind really well. You might use your breath. You might use a typical mindfulness practice. You might have a Zen practice. You might already have something that really is effective for you in taming your mind. And this part of the TSD mindfulness teachings, it's really about what works for you, getting from point A to point B. And point B is taming your mind. And when we get to the teachings that are more about soothing your gut and dwelling your heart, then that becomes a little bit more specific. And so it probably isn't going to be as good to stray off into different directions when we get to that part of the practice. Probably better to stick with what I'm teaching you. But the taming the mind's a little bit different. That's a little bit more open-ended. It's more about like what works for you. Okay, there are technologies out there, neurofeedback. Have you heard of the Muse? You put the headband on and it's got neurofeedback and it measures your brain waves. If that tames your mind, use the Muse. Use what works for you. But if you are someone that has been trying to meditate for a really long time, or maybe not a really long time, and doesn't have this quite mastered yet, is struggling with this idea of taming the mind, there's still a lot of chatter, then I invite you to use these techniques that I'm sharing this week in the next few classes to help you to get to that place where you're really quieting the mind, that chatter is going down. And I have ADHD, and so I have had to use some alternative techniques to really get to that tameness. So if I can do it, you can do it, all right? So let's keep going with this and see where it takes us. All right, we're almost ready for meditation. All right. Yeah. So I think we're ready. I think I've said everything that I need to get you set up and ready to do this. And now it's your turn to get into a place that works for you. If you want to lie down, you can lie down. It's all right. But if lying down makes you sleepy, it's hard for you to focus, then lying down is probably not a good position for you. Then you might want to sit up. Um, and so other people, you might decide to sit for this meditation. And I don't know, it might be about 10, 15 minutes. I'm not exactly sure how long it's going to be. It looks like we only have 20 minutes, about 20 minutes left in our class. Um, so, um, all right, I think it's going to work. Okay. So go ahead and find a comfortable position. Close your eyes. Take in a few relaxing breaths with me. We'll inhale. And as you breathe out, feel your shoulders relax. Another inhale. And as you exhale, feel your abdomen relax. One more focused inhale. And as you exhale, feel your mind settle. Notice the sounds in your environment. What do you hear? Perhaps a fan blowing, or noise inside your house. If it is absolutely quiet, consider that you are listening to the space in between the sounds. If there are multiple sounds, choose one to focus your attention on. If you notice your attention drift in another direction, exercise your will and choose to focus on the sound. I'd also like you to take a step back in your consciousness and notice the part of your consciousness that focuses your attention. Notice the part of your consciousness that focuses your attention. And it can manifest and express itself in any way. Don't second guess yourself, just however it feels for you. And then take another step back and notice the energy and the behavior of this part of your consciousness, the part of your consciousness that steers your attention. Is it childlike? Is it unfocused? Is it tired? Is it clear? So still continuing to follow the sounds in your environment. And noticing the texture of the sound. Does it have a low or high pitch? Is it a constant sound? Or is it disjointed? Is it sharp or dull? If directing your attention toward the sound becomes challenging, consider directing your attention on the part of your consciousness that chooses the direction of your attention. So you're just taking that step back and noticing that part of your consciousness that steers your attention. What energy do you notice there? What is its behavior? So on your own, continue to notice the sounds and choose one to focus on. You may decide to switch your focus to a different sound. And if you notice your attention moving away, notice the part of your consciousness that steers your attention. See how this part of your consciousness expresses itself. And then taking a step back from that even more and noticing the behavior and the energy of that part of your consciousness. Is it staticky? Is it spinning? Is it very focused? Is it stern? Is it playful? Remember, the only control or the only will that we are exercising is our will to direct our attention on the sound. All other will we let go. We concentrate our will on steering our attention toward the sound. So on your own, you're directing your attention toward the sound, and then also becoming mindful when it feels right of the part of your consciousness that steers your attention. And then if it feels right, to notice the behavior and the energy of that part of your consciousness. All right, we're going to begin to conclude the meditation. I'm going to ring a singing bowl to show the conclusion of the meditation. Welcome back. I'm going to talk a little bit about next class, a little bit how to prepare for next class. While I do that, I invite you to type in any questions that you have. We have a few minutes left, and I would love to use this time to answer any questions that you have. Okay, I can see if you type them in on the chat. This is new. I'm all figuring this out. My 13-year-old son set this all up for me. He knows how to game and stream and all that stuff. So I think I've got it worked out. I think it's okay. So if you have questions, you can go ahead and put those in the chat while I'm chatting up about a couple weeks, next class. So the next class is going to be on Tuesday, November 19th. And if you want to read ahead for this class, you can read my blog post on the TSD Mindfulness Objective. So the TSD Mindfulness teachings, I don't know if you've been to the teaching page, but they're in lists, similar to Buddhism. So there's a list, the first list of 1, second list has 2, the third list has 3 lists, and so forth. And so that first list is the TSD Mindfulness Objective. And the TSD Mindfulness Objective is to move into perfect relationships by taming your mind, soothing your gut, and dwelling in your heart. I want to address the word perfect because this could be misconstrued and could throw everything off. So let's just talk about that right away. The word perfect describes relationships, and sometimes when we think about the word perfect, we think about clean and neat and beautiful and without flaws. That is not the kind of perfect that I'm talking about and that TSD Mindfulness Teachings is talking about. It's not the kind of perfect. So let's kind of like wipe that clean and let's start over. The perfection that it speaks of is perfect for you. Right? So that's part of it. So it's meant to be particular to you. All right. A good way to illustrate this is a while back I was not at my house and I was at a friend's house and I wanted to meditate. And I meditate actually with my eyes open. We'll do some of that. And I meditate looking at my stacked stones. And I did not have my stacked stones, so I was looking for something natural to meditate on. I can't meditate looking at something that was made by man necessarily. It needs to be like from nature. So my friend had a guinea pig, and so I grabbed some of the wood chips. I don't think I actually got them out of the guinea pig cage. I don't think I used dirty one. I think I found like the new wood chips. Anyway, I grabbed a couple handfuls of the guinea pig wood chips and I stacked them on the table in front of me. Just threw them, tossed them there. And I thought, well, that'll do. So I did my meditation. I have my eyes open. I practice mindfulness, noticing all the subtleties of what I'm visually experiencing. And it was so incredible what happened, because once I got into that meditative state, tamed the mind, once I got into that state, the wood chips took on this whole different look. They looked perfect. It looked like each wood chip, there must have been a few thousand, I don't know. It looked like somebody had spent like an hour on each wood chip, placing them. Like I couldn't believe how perfect the arrangement was of those wood chips. I was just like blown away. So that's the kind of perfection that I'm talking about. I'm talking about the kind of perfection that from the outside, it could be messy. It could be messy. But from the inside looking out, it looks perfect. So it's not how it looks from the outside looking in, it looks perfect from the inside looking out. That's the kind of perfection that TSD mindfulness teachings are talking about. The perfect relationships that we're creating. And I think what's key about that is that this type of perfection can't be understood intellectually. Okay, this kind of perfection can be understood by the heart. And that's what we're working towards with this TSD mindfulness practice. All right, so it doesn't look like there's any comments yet, but we're on a little bit of delay. You see me about maybe a minute after I'm talking. That's a little secret in streaming. So, I don't know, maybe I'll just wait just a little bit and see if anybody decides to add a comment. This part of the class is probably not going to take a long time right now since it's kind of small, but as it grows and there's more people, I think this portion of the class will be a little bit longer portion. Well, it appears that you don't have any questions, so maybe I did a perfect job explaining everything and everything's very clear. If you do have questions at any time in the next 2 weeks before the next class, please don't hesitate to email me, text me. I've shared my phone number with you as well as my email. I'm happy to explain any of that. I really hope that you decide to take this practice and work with it for the next couple weeks. I have the notes from this class posted on the classes page of my website. I wish I had a slide that had my website on it, but it's tsdmind.org, tsdmind.org. And on the classes page at the bottom, you'll see that there is a link to the notes from this class. And so if you want to download those, the meditation, I actually shortened the meditation a little bit than the one that's in the notes. There's a little bit more that I was going to do, but you can use that to help guide you, or you could play this stream again and I could lead you through it again. But either way, I really strongly encourage you, if you can, commit to at least 5 times a week, so it'd be 10 times by the time we come together next, to practice this taming of the mind. And so you might want to do what I led you through, was to notice a sound and then take that step back and notice that part of your consciousness that is steering your attention and the behavior of that part of your consciousness. You can also focus on a sensation in the body. You could do the same thing. Or you could practice your own approach that you feel that's really working for you in taming that mind, because that's the first step that we need to do to work on this system. All right. Okay, well, I'm so glad that you are watching live. I'm so glad those of you that are viewing the recording. It's so good to know that you're there and you're here and you're open to what this practice has to offer you. If you really feel that this is helpful and you got something out of this class, I hope that you share a little donation. There's also a donation link on the classes page. I don't set a fee for this class. It's just by donation, and there's no donation that's too small. It's really just to show that you are part of this. Even $1 would show me that you are here and you are listening and you're part of this. So have a good night. That's all I have for you.